TCU at Utah. Marco, what should bettors be looking at?
TCU is the best defense in the country. It's held 5 straight opponents to 7 points or less, but Utah is going to be the best offense they faced all season.
All right, so we talked before the game, or before the video here, is you think this number's about right. So here's the thing, we give a projection on every game, but sometimes the projection's going to be the number's about right, which, let's be honest, if it wasn't, there wouldn't be the big hotels in Vegas. Is a vast majority of games the number's right. So that doesn't mean that we can't talk about the handicapping factors, because some of our listeners might say, you know, I actually discount the pro-Utah stuff. I agree with what you guys are saying on the pro-TCU. I'm going TCU. But in a way, we want to frame the conversation. All right, so let's talk about TCU's defense, which was your first key point. First question is always going to be strength of schedule. So as you go inside the box score with TCU, is that, because that's kind of a ticker stat. Oh, look, TCU, they only scored 5 or 3 points. They only scored 7 points. As you look at the yardage, as you look at the inside the box score, is TCU that good on D?
They are that good on D. They haven't really been tested, you know, all year. Their best games that they had talent-wise, opponent-wise, was at the beginning of the season. So defenses are always ahead of the offenses at the beginning of the season because you don't have your timing down. Now, late in the season, Utah finely tuned offense, balanced. They run the ball and pass the ball equally as well. That's going to be the major test. This is going to be a good game. Utah is a team, to me, that's been flying under the radar. I mean, when you hear the talk about the teams, you know, the Boise's, the TCU's, Utah's not been in that conversation. But this week when
And here's the thing. If TCU and Boise each had a loss or weren't as good as they are, Utah would be getting all the attention as the non-BCS school.
Right. But as much as you haven't heard the talking heads talk about Utah, the BCS rankings have them 5th. You know, so they've soared up the BCS. And if the winner of this game, whoever it is, I think really is going to have a good shot at playing for the national championship.
Well, and again, that's a non-betting point, so we'll go over it very quickly. Assuming Oregon doesn't have a real competitive game the rest of the year, now the interesting question is, in the Auburn-Alabama winner, assuming that they don't lose any other games, if Auburn wins, clearly an SEC team is going to make it, a Pac-10 team is going to make it. But assuming that it's Alabama, does a one-loss Alabama beat Boise for the BCS? But then the next question is, does the winner of this game beat Boise? So what you could have is Alabama with 1 loss, Oregon in there, Alabama with 1 loss, Boise with 1 loss, and the winner of this game, Boise with no losses, and the winner of this game with no losses. Amongst those 3, one's going to be left out. Right. So that's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, and if it's TCU that's the winner, Boise's got no shot of leapfrogging them with their schedule the rest of the way. If both teams
So what you're saying is, in your opinion, if TCU wins out, they have the better chance of making the BCS than Boise?
I do.
Well, that's not what the talking heads are saying. All right, but let's get back to the betting side of things. We'll leave the water cooler to our friends at the Mike and Mike show. Okay, so what you're telling me is, as you look at this TCU team, now here's what's interesting. Vegas does their odds makers poll. Vegas has TCU as the very best team in the country. They're saying if they were making a true line, not worrying about public perception, TCU would be favored over every team in the country on a neutral field. All right, so one, that makes me want to play TCU because very few bettors are going to say that. So that means I'm on the odds maker side. But then I think you're absolutely right about Utah. The fact that Boise and TCU are undefeated has Utah under the radar, which makes me think they're underrated. So I think TCU might be 2 points underrated. Utah might be 2 points underrated. So net, the line's probably about right is what you're speaking to.
I have right now, my projection is TCU winning the game by 4. The line's 5.
All right, so give us your official projection.
I have TCU 24-20. I will note people might look at Utah's game last week against Air Force and say, oh, they almost lost last week. That was to be expected. Playing this game this week, they had to be looking ahead, and we just talked about it in an earlier video. Air Force is one of those teams with those quirky offenses that it's hard to prepare for, especially if you got one eye thinking about a bigger pie next week.
A pie.
Well,
you have a lot of food analogies.
That's it.
Let me ask you a question. When you have a pie at home, and let's say that you're not worried about your wife or anything else, do you eat it straight from the tin, or do you cut a separate piece out into a plate?
Pie, it depends what kind. Apple pie, I'm going to pull it out because I got to put it on
Do you like
a plate.
the apple pie chilled?
No.
All right.
So that's why I said I'm cutting it out. I'm actually taking it to the microwave, and then I'm going to nuke it for about 30 seconds. Then we bring out the ice cream.
The a la mode, right on, and then it melt. Do you let the ice cream touch the pie, and so it melts a little bit, or do you keep it
right
on
top.
Right on top.
Right on top.
No,
and a tradition from back in Pittsburgh, there used to be a chain of restaurants, King's, and they had cinnamon ice cream that they put on their hot apple pie.
You like that, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
Now let me ask you. When do you eat the pie out of the tin? Ever?
When it's just the last piece.
Yeah. So then you just pull it out, and then you scrape
But that
up.
last piece could. I have different sizes on what the last.
So it might be half the pie. Oh, that's it. One piece left.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Proof that Utah is under the radar. They just all games, last 11 games, they're 9-1-1 ATS. So though they're favored in most of these games, they're exceeding expectations. Last comment to kind of talk about the fact that this game is kind of, you can see both sides. Last year, the team scored in this matchup 83 points, which would make you think all two high-powered offenses. In the last 6 years, counting last year, they've only averaged a combined 36 points. So it really is you look at it one way and it's go left, look at it the other way, go right. I think this might be one to watch for me.
It's going to be a highly entertaining game. One other point, that if this thing comes down to the end of the game and it's tight, TCU has not been in a dogfight yet this year. Utah has. First week of the season, they played Pitt at home, and they went to overtime against Pitt. So that experience of a tight game, and then, of course, last week, the tight game against Air Force, that is a plus if you come down to the fourth quarter with the stakes as high as they are in this game.
All right, good stuff. Now it's your turn to continue the conversation in the comments section with Marco and me. You can talk about pie or this game. And next up, we're going to be talking about Alabama at LSU.